Of course, many of you will know that the party produced a pamphlet on the Northern Ireland Civil Rights Association and Civil Rights Movement called Civil Rights Reform or Revolution. And the party did that because it felt it was important that there should be an accurate account both of the party's role and the achievements of Nicra and the Civil Rights Campaign. And that was very prescient given what's happened this year, given the fact of essentially the lies, the myths and the dishonesty that has been perpetrated in the media from various factions and parties in relation to the civil rights movement. We also held a commemoration in 2008 for Nicra in this very hotel at our Northern Conference. The theme of that conference was in fact the struggle for civil rights, and we made a number of presentations to people who were organisers and activists in the Civil Rights Association in those days, and we credited the role of a number of people, and we also acknowledged at that stage the role of women in that campaign, which was absolutely of vital importance as well. Two of the people who were present on that occasion, one was Eugene Lytle from Coal Island, and the other person who was present at that time, and happily is with us again today, a famous activist, organiser in the civil rights movement in Derry from the very earliest days, and I suppose people would like to refer to as veterans, but that's exactly what he is, of the civil rights struggle, Eamon Malloch, and perhaps he will give you I want to call now on another veteran of the civil rights struggle who was very active, and particularly in our local area, in the Civil Rights, Northern Ireland Civil Rights Association, to give us her personal account, recollections and involvement in civil rights. Marion Donnelly. So,
I'm not a veteran, I'm only a young cutter. But anyway, comrades, friends, I'm sure there are a lot of people here who have many more memories of civil rights and more experiences than what I'm recounting here. These are just my own personal experiences. And as I said, there was a song of the civil rights period, it went something like, I'm not going to sing it, cool and dark the morning, just before the dawn, a new day was breaking. And it was, a new day was breaking, and our struggle had begun. The people were roused. We were off our knees. We no longer would we accept the role of second-class citizenship, or accept the undemocratic, sectarian, corrupt party that had been in power for nearly 50 years. The state of Northern Ireland under the one-party rule has been well documented. It's a party that held on to power by means of discrimination, gerrymandering, division, and repressive legislation. And it did this with the help of the so-called opposition nationalist party, which was content to accept its half a loaf. Half a loaf is better than no bread, its leader said. Now, some meaningful groups were drawing attention to all the inadequacies and the injustices that were rife at that time. Groups like, well, our own Republican clubs, which of course were banned, the McCluskeys in Dungannon, Wolf Tone societies, the unions, the Campaign for Democracy in Ulster, which was a Labour Party group in Westminster. But the great mass of the people were not involved. There was no mass movement. No. Nicra changed that all. The civil rights brought the people onto the streets. It was the greatest movement in Ireland since the formation of the United Irishmen in the 1790s. Nicra smashed the sectarian, corrupt and arrogant establishment by one simple demand, the demand for civil rights. It was not a political organisation, it was not a violent organisation, It wasn't a nationalist organisation, nor a Republican organisation. It wasn't a socialist group. It was merely demanding the reform of the Northern Ireland state, and that was its strength. The reform of the state for the benefit of all its citizens, not just a few. And unfortunately, not everyone accepted this or understood it. But the idea for Nicra actually originated with our party after all the soul searching that went on in the early 60s. And as a result of the 50s campaign, the party looked where it went wrong and came up with the idea of a civil rights association. That's where the idea took hold, but it took root in Mahara. Like Balaki tried to claim it, but they're not getting it. Subsequently, Nicra was launched in Belfast in February 1967. It had 5 objectives. 1, to defend basic freedoms of all citizens. 2, to protect the rights of the individual. 3, to highlight all possible abuses of power. To demand guarantees for freedom of speech, assembly and association. To inform the public of their lawful rights. And these were condensed into our rallying cries at marches and demonstrations into one man, one vote, end discrimination, end gerrymandering, disband the B-men, disarm the RUC, and so on. Now, a lot of these ends were achieved, but, well, after a period of time. And they were achieved by the foot soldiers on the ground. Not by John Hume, not by Evan Cooper, not by Austin Curry, nor Bernadette Devlin, not by the bomb or the bullet, but by the foot soldiers on the street, by you and me, out doing our part for civil rights. It was brought about by the street demands, by demonstrations. The first of these was a march from Coalisland to Dungannon in August 68. Our party members from South Derry were all there. Will Goodman brought his own car, 3 or 4 passengers in it. The rest brought their own cars. It was a tame enough affair and got very little publicity. But then came October the 5th in Derry. People marching for basic civil rights in an orderly, non-violent way were battened to the ground by the RUC at the command of not an inch Minister for Home Affairs, Bill Craig. What we have, we hold, he said. He was probably the most hated man in Ireland at that time and was partly responsible, in a way, for Stormont losing its grip on what it held. Comrade Hugh Scullion came home that night with blood pouring from his head and to be met by a family friend who later recounted to my mother, indeed, if I had been his mother, I would have given him another crack on the head, up to all those shenanigans. I suppose Hugh would have some words to tell you about that. From then on, Northern Ireland took centre stage on the world. People here were electrified. Civil rights groups sprang up all over the place. Our local civil rights group in South Derry was formalised at a PAC meeting in Galladuff Hall, where those elected was the chairman, Francis Donnelly, secretary, Marion Devlin, treasurer, Michael Bryson. We set about arranging a campaign of civil rights to benefit the citizens of South Derry. It was also significant because it's the first time I set eyes on Francie Donnelly. As I said before, the civil rights did him the world of good. Now, from then on, we were active, demonstrating, marching, picketing. We supported the PD march from Belfast to Derry. and some of our local supporters were in a car that was overturned by loyalists in Mahara while the police stood back and let it happen. It was only when cameras of the press came along that they intervened. There was all sorts of abuses of powers that we pointed out, demonstrated against. That march led in a way to Bernadette Devlin standing for South Derry in the local government elections. She was opposing the safe seat held by Chichester Clark. At the meeting in Galaduff to select her as a candidate, there was one local civil rights member opposed it, saying, Chichester Clark is a very good representative, he got the farmers a good price for their bugs that year. Nevertheless, we went ahead and proposed Bernadette Devlin as our candidate. It's led the way to her being the candidate then for Westminster, to which she was elected. But that Stormont election was the beginning of the SDLP. Hume was elected and Curry was elected, and so was Ivan Cooper. And all the time, civil rights continued to hold marches, meetings, pickets to highlight the new public order bill, with sit-downs at Greenloch and at Toome, picketing the local council to object to their allocation of housing, petitions taking up the closure of a playground on a Sunday. Then in August '69 there was internment. There was an outcry. Now compared to the 50s, when internment was introduced, people said, oh, that's too bad, but nobody lifted a finger and nobody objected. Now, in '69, the people had already been mobilised, there was an outcry. We threatened a huge civil disobedience campaign, and within 2 or 3 weeks, they were out. Francis Donnelly and Dennis Cassidy were two of our local members who were arrested at that time. Repression continued, civil rights continued, showing up abuses, young people were being arrested, threatened, special activities were becoming more and more threatening. There were roadblocks, harassment, searches, all parades were banned. And the local Ancient Order of Hibernians normally had a parade through Mahara on the 15th of August. It was also banned. At our insistence, they decided to go ahead and defy the ban. Now, it was very unusual to see Republicans and Hibernians marching together, but they did. One of them was arrested, and he happened to be a member of the Republican clubs at that time. He was charged and found guilty. None of them was arrested. At the same time, our demand for a Bill of Rights was gaining force. The GAA gave us permission to take up signatures at the Dolan versus Derry match in Screen. Not everybody supported it, not everybody would sign it, which still indicates that some people were still wary of civil rights involvement. There was a march in Enniskillen against this bill of this Public Order Act, and a lot of us were summoned and charged with taking part in an illegal march. We had a meeting, all those who were charged, and decided not to attend court, which we didn't. We were all fined £12 each. In our meeting, we decided not to pay the £12. We would go to jail if needs be. But as it happened, somebody else paid the fine, and my local GAA club paid mine. I don't know whether I'm grateful or not for that, but that was that. People were flocking to meetings everywhere, and people were looking for organisation. They were looking for the way ahead. Marfeld was the main town in South Derry, and it wasn't organised. We decided to try and have a meeting there. The local parish hall was a big centre in Marfeld. We had to go to the parish priest to get permission to use it. He refused, he wouldn't let us use it. So we went to the cardinal in our map, and he wouldn't meet us. We came back to Marfeld and went to the curate. He said, right, go ahead and advertise your meeting. We went ahead and advertised a meeting at St. John's Hall, and the curate at Mass announced that a civil rights meeting would be held at St. John's Hall. He got the caretaker to leave the door opened, and the hall was packed. Unfortunately, that particular day, the provost had set off a firebomb in one of the local shops. It was an effort, we thought, to undermine the Civil Rights Association. It was a terrible time then. Paramilitaries on both sides were becoming more active. Young men were being arrested. Anytime they were arrested, we tried to get in touch with the local authorities. I remember getting in touch with the local commandant one time to complain about a young, innocent fella being taken away. He said, I don't know where he is. I said, he went away in one of your tanks. He said, I couldn't care less if he took a number 2 bus. We didn't have number 2 buses in South Derry, but anyway. That Christmas, we had a Christmas campaign where the area was in mourning. There was no Christmas trees put up, no Christmas cards to be sent, no enjoyment. The area was in mourning because internment had been introduced. And we had a fast outside the barracks in Marfeld from 8 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock in the evening. And that Christmas fast went on. That was 71, 72, 73 and 74 was the last one we had. It was something to give up your Christmas dinner and stand outside the barracks in Marfeld. The bombings continued. A huge march was held in McGilligan Strand to protest against internment. And later on that week, we held, the Civil Rights Executive held a meeting in Belfast to garner support for the proposed march in Derry at the end of January. Now everybody knows what happened on Bloody Sunday. And I may go on about Bloody Sunday a lot, but I was there, I know what happened, and I can't forget it, and I never will forget it. It effectively put an end to the civil rights mass movement. We had one defiant march after that in Uri, and it was a well-attended march, but there was no huge marches after that. We continued to protest, to send letters, and to contact this one and contact that one. Even on D-Day, which was a couple of weeks after Bloody Sunday, we had all sorts of activities to mark the 6th month of internment. We cut down trees and blocked roads, had sit-downs, but internment continued, and in March, Stormont was prorogued. Now, by this time, the provost had attempted to sideline the CRA and set up its own northern resistance movement. And in fact, I attended the meeting because I was told by Edwina to represent CRA at it. And luckily enough, because of we were able to curtail their movements in South Derry. The civil rights continued as the main spokesperson for the people. Unfortunately, at the same time, the SDLP called for an end to extension, that everybody was back taking their seats again on the council on Stormont. Civil rights opposed this and called on the people to stay firm. But Hume and Cooper were big voices, had a lot of influence, and it was the beginning of the cracks in the civil rights movement. The Provost bombing campaign split the people even further, and drove them off the streets. There was some funny things happened too, like especially my driving didn't come in for a lot of praise. I had to drive people, they're all dead now, like Malachy and Desi and Tomas. I had to drive them here, there and everywhere else. And they didn't enjoy my, Sean Kenny said one time when I had to collect him, "Oh, Marion Devlin, I've heard about you. I don't want to get into the car with me driving." But he did. Well, some of the gains that we had made were lost. The police were rearmed, the B-men were replaced by UDR. The parliamentarians took over from street activity. Austin Curry imposed a fine on those he had encouraged to join the rates and rent strike. The bombs and the bullets blew the people apart and off the streets. Now, we're having a march, commemoration march in Gull Island in August. And as I said before, our people were there in 50 years ago. We will be there this year, and Will Gibbons' car that he had 50 years ago will be there, and some of the passengers he had with him then will also be there. So I hope you'll all be there.
Thank you, Marion. And Marion was quite correct, I see Eamon as well here. Marion is quite correct that there are a number of events. The party has established a subcommittee on civil rights for this year, and there will be a number of events organised by the party during the coming year. Now, I would like to invite, because this is an important subject, other people up to make their contributions. We'll allow some little time for that. So if anybody wishes to make a contribution, Eamon, would you like to say a few words?
I'll give you a blank check. My name is Eamon Malone, and I'll describe myself to you very accurately. I'm an extraordinarily ordinary human being. And before I say anything about the civil rights, I would like to make comment about the last contribution about the fate of children. Every day in our sad and sordid world, 26,000 innocent children die each and every day from starvation. 1,400 die every day from the lack of clean, safe drinking water. Every day, world governments spend, listen to the figure, 10 billion American dollars on the procurement of arms to kill fellow human beings. One day's armament budget could feed the hungry for years. These are cold, statistical facts. They won't do that, of course. I work with the destitute from as far away in the east as Nepal to Mexico in the west. And I've seen some sights that I wish I'd never encountered. I have a charity called Action with Effect, and we set up a number of schools, an orphanage, built 74 houses for lepers, almost exclusively the responsibility of the person who's now addressing you. It is my considered opinion that if every family in the developed world give £1 per week, we could feed the hungry to the extent where nobody need die from starvation, but the money will have to be given to NGOs and spent very wisely. Now, I'll talk to you a bit about civil rights. I come home from a period of exile in England, registered as a conscientious objector and went to jail. Came home totally committed to being a ramrod or a lightning conductor to shake up the political foundation of Northern Ireland. One of the things I did very early on, I'm talking about the days of the Republican clubs, we took on the plight of the itinerants in Derry, and we got them dole money, we got them houses, and some of the children have actually gone as far as education at third level. So that's the kind of thing, when you talk about civil rights, the civil rights started long before the Northern Ireland Civil Rights Association began. The Workers' Party in Derry, as it became, was fairly active in the local politics of the area. Now, you had an iniquitous situation in the north of Ireland where hundreds of thousands of people were not allowed to vote at local government elections because they were subtenants. A businessman of any hue could have anything up to 17 votes at local government elections. That was the iniquitous system, and there wasn't a political party or a political leader of the day that mentioned these facts, because the political parties were all led by Catholic businessmen or Protestant businessmen. But I was determined at my level to shake the system up. And when the first civil rights march in Northern Ireland was from Pole Island to Dungannon, and I was there, I ran a bus, a lady called Bridget Bond, now deceased. We ran a bus, and the bus was, you can describe it whatever way you want, it was either half full or half empty. But what amazed me at the march was the militancy of women. It struck me very, very forcibly. When I got on the bus to come down, I said, the next Civil Rights March will be in Derry. I'm going to write to Northern Ireland Civil Rights Association on Monday and invite them down. Well, anyhow, I planned the route. The Republican clubs were heavily involved. I planned the route for the 5th of October. It was a provocative route to suggest in that we would end our march inside holy, sanctified, unionist territory inside the Derry walls. In fact, I was the only person from Derry invited by the Northern Ireland Civil Rights Association to address the meeting. Now, I knew, I was utterly and totally and completely convinced the march would be banned. And I said to the Republican Club of the day, when our blood flows, Stormont goes. There will be a gap between one and the other. On the Thursday before the 5th of October, Fergus Pyle, who was a brilliant journalist who worked for the Times, met me in Shirkby Street. Eamon, he says, I have bad news for you. I said, what is it, Fergus? He says, your march is banned. I told him, you couldn't have brought me better news. But are you certain? And he said, this is about 2:30 in the day. He had a meeting with Willie Craig, the Minister of Home Affairs, at 11:30 in the morning, and Willie Craig had a problem with alcohol. He was drunk. And according to Fergus Pyle, and I believe him, Craig said to Fergus Pyle, the instructions to the RUC are to wipe the Derry streets clear of demonstrators. So when I went on the march, and there wasn't too many there, I put on a new suit to try and look respectable. I bought 6 white hankies, one for each of my 6 pockets, to act as bandages. I knew that her blood was going to flow, but I thought it was a price worth paying if we could won some semblance of civil rights from the Unionist administration. Now, it was the people on the streets who won the concessions, not the organisers. It was the people. It was the attendance of the people on the streets, and they're to be congratulated for it. Now, in the early days of civil rights, I was instructed by the Northern Ireland Civil Rights Association to go and see the 4th person of the Blessed Trinity, Mr. John Hume, to see if he would become involved. And he says, no, I do not have the time. Well, he came on the 5th of October. He saw what happened. He saw the instant militancy of the people. Then he had all the time in the world. Such was the degree of hypocrisy. These are facts that are not generally known to the Derry public. I know them because I was heavily involved with a small group of other people, and we were all left-wing socialist Republicans. That's basically the start. You've got a comprehensive history of it from out of there. So that's all I want to say to you. But, as they say in Portuguese, la luta continua. The struggle must continue. Thank you very much.